Nikki has still not been found. She's a 39-year-old mother of 4 from Shasta County, California, and some major updates have happened within this past week or so. Now, I've watched videos from some of my favorite and well-respected YouTubers like 𝐑𝐚𝐧𝐠 from Grizzly True Crime and also Kimbyrleigha. I look up to both of those women. They are beyond kind, compassionate, and intelligent, and I aspire to do the same and get the word out there as well. Now, she went missing last year in 2024 of May, and her case has just been classified as a homicide on March 14th. So just a couple days before I'm actually recording this video, and that is huge. That distinction changes so much because before this, Nikki was merely classified as missing. And the reason this is very important is because an investigation changes. It gets more intense, and the authorities have more power to investigate for an actual perpetrator. Whereas in a missing persons case, their sole focus is on finding the person. But now, sadly, they are assuming that Nikki is deceased, and they are actively seeking to identify who killed her and what the circumstances were surrounding her death. As with any current and unsolved case, everything in this video is alleged. It's gathered from online sources, which I link below in my videos, and any speculation is just that. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Not only do I want to thank all of you, but also the support I get from my sponsors, like the one for today's video. They help me create this content for you and give back to organizations like the Stephanie Pars Foundation. We became, as a whole, this channel, a Soaring Angel donor, and that is fitting because this charity helps DV victims and survivors, as well as missing persons cases, and that is what we are focusing on in this case. And today's sponsor was actually introduced to me by some of you. It was a couple months ago. I was in an Uber. The sun was shining from that huge window on the roof. And I thought to myself, oh, this is great lighting for a selfie. Only to realize I was losing my hair postpartum. Now, I am 9 months out so far, and my hair began breaking just a few months ago, back in January. And I was devastated. Now, I can hide it when my hair is curly, but all of you may know that I straighten my hair. That's how it usually looks. And when I do, my hair just sticks straight up where it's breaking off. I took a video and I put it on Instagram and I started asking all of you, what should I do? And several of you responded with relating to this because it happened to you and also asking if I find something to let you know. And a few others responded with Nutrafol, which was something that I had never heard of. So I looked it up immediately and I started my journey. Now, Nutrafol is a #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand. They're trusted by over 1.5 million people. See thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. I started taking them at the end of January before I even decided to talk about them with all of you, and I'm specifically taking the postpartum version. Now, you can take a quiz on their website to find out which unique formula is right for you, and you take 4 pills daily with a meal. It's only been a couple months for me, so I do have to wait to share my 3 to 6 months update. But I've already seen so many other reviews that are just amazing, so it doesn't hurt to try it. I don't even like taking pills, but it's worth it because I know so many people love the product, and already I've definitely experienced less shedding. But there are other benefits, like better sleep. And when you are postpartum, it's hard to get a good night's sleep and feel fully rested. But I noticed I'm sleeping better, and even my mood feels boosted. Now, everyone's experience and results will be different. Everyone's root causes of hair thinning is unique, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to hair growth. And that's why they've created specialized formulas tailored to your specific needs. Whether you are navigating postpartum like I am, you're experiencing menopause, or you're living a plant-based lifestyle, Nutrafol provides your hair exactly what it needs to grow strong and healthy at every stage. And while many supplements only rely on individual ingredient studies, Nutrafol goes a step further by clinically testing their complete formulas to make sure they truly work. Actually, in a clinical study, 86% of women saw improved hair growth after using Nutrafol for just 6 months. That's why I'm excited to show you sort of a before and after. I mean, you saw my breakage. Also, Nutrafol's physician-formulated supplements use 100% drug-free ingredients to help you achieve visibly thicker, stronger hair from the inside out. By targeting causes of hair thinning like stress, Hormones, aging, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism, Nutrafol supports your hair's unique needs as they change throughout your life. It feels very personalized, and that's what I like about it. Now, I'm going to put some updates on my Instagram, and I'll let you know all the details, and I would love for you to join me and start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol. Right now, Nutrafol is offering my audience $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you click the link in my description and you enter the promo code Kimbyrleigha. I will leave it on the screen. I know it is hard to spell, but find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair by ordering today. And be sure to use my code to support this channel. Again, click the link in the description and use my code Kimbyrleigha. Thank you all for giving me your time for that. Now let me introduce you to Nikki. She was born in Thailand on November 9th of 1984, and she has 3 sisters, 2 of which have been very vocal and outspoken about this case. That's Chloe and Kay. You're going to be hearing about them more and more in this video, and I will be providing you with statements that they have made in their search for their sister. And there's also Nikki's sister, May. The family actually originated in Thailand, and Nikki went by her Mian name, which is Chang, but over time her sisters explained that people began calling her by the nickname Nikki, and it stuck. That's when they moved to the US. Nikki's parents decided to immigrate to the US because back in Thailand, they were actually living in a refugee camp after the Vietnam War, and they moved to many different places trying to make a better life for themselves and eventually their children. And finally, they landed in Seattle, Washington, and eventually Redding, California, where this case takes place. And it is in Shasta County, and if that sounds familiar to you, because it did to me right away, that is because of the Sherry Papini case. If you don't know what this case is about, there are plenty of videos where you can deep dive it. Well, it happened there as well. And to give you a short synopsis of that case, she faked her disappearance back in 2016, and it was a huge case back then, and it's still mentioned recently because these cases that are hoax, they take up so much precious time and resources that could be used to help real victims. And I digress, but from what I've read and seen from Nikki's sisters, she seemed like the kind of person that everyone wanted to be around, full of life, fun, and always ready to make others laugh. She had a free spirit and a contagious sense of humor, the kind that could instantly lift your mood, and friends would describe her as goofy, bubbly, and brave. She was kind, she had a big heart, and she had nurturing instincts about her. She always wanted to make others feel taken care of, and she was very close to her family, including her extended family. She dreamed of having a big family of her own one day. Redding, California was a choice for her family because of the culture there. It's a very popular location for the Hmong community, and Nikki and her family are from Hmong descent, originating in Southeast Asia. So all of her cousins, aunts, uncles, they were all close by growing up when they all moved to the United States. Nikki was also petite, only 4'11", and about 90 to 100 pounds, and that is going to play into this. So that's why I'm mentioning, also because, of course, we want her description to be out there. We do not know what happened, so it's important to know exactly, and we'll go into more details about what she looked like when she disappeared. But from the info her sisters provided, which will come into play, she had this feisty side where she could be tough like a chihuahua, her sister Kay said, feisty, confident, and never afraid to stand up for herself. But she carried herself with a quiet strength, shaped by experiences that no one should ever have to endure, which we will get into. Nikki had a heart as big as her spirit. Her sister Chloe said that she was goofy and full of laughter and always giggling, and had this unique quality about her that really stood out to me, and it probably will for you too, given the comment she ended up making. I heard it on Kendall Rae's channel. She shared that Nikki's sisters told her that Nikki was fascinated by true crime, and what stood out the most was her deep empathy, even for those who had done the terrible things, the killers, which isn't easy for many of us to do. I know it's personally hard for me, but Nikki could see the pain in their eyes and the pain behind their actions. She always looked for the good in people, even when it wasn't easy to find. And that forgiving nature was part of her beauty, though at times it may have been her greatest vulnerability. She was at her core a genuinely loving person. She was someone whose compassion reached everyone around her. And I like to go to a person's personal Facebook, and that's what I did in this case. And it really showed me a part of who Nikki was and things about her. I kind of get to know people from what they post on their Facebook. And you could really tell that she had a lot of friends and family who adored her, and she was very close to. She was always smiling. She was beautiful inside and out from what I could tell. And I'll go into more of that once I tell you how she ended up married with kids and then eventually moving to Happy Valley. However, it was anything but happy. It didn't start that way. It usually doesn't, right? In the late 2000s, when Nikki was in her 20s, she started working as a cocktail waitress at the Wind River Resort and Casino, which was close to where she was living in Redding, California. That's where she ends up meeting her future husband, Tyler McCain. Tyler Scott McCain was born in March of 1985 and only about a year younger than Nikki. He's a local to Redding, and he and his family are members of the local Redding Rancheria tribe. Now, this is an important aspect of the case. So if you're not familiar, some indigenous tribes live on federally recognized reserves, and the Redding Rancheria is a reservation in Shasta County, and tribal reservations have a right to establish their own governments and their own laws that are separate from the state, and they're treated as a separate nation in many respects. They establish their own civil and criminal laws within the reservation and in regard to their members. The Redding Rancheria is special because it's actually home to 3 different tribes: the Wintu tribe, the 𝐑𝐞𝐝𝐻𝐻, I hope I'm saying that right, who are also known as the Pit River tribe, and the 𝐊𝐢𝐳 tribes. It was established back in 1922 as a safe place for homeless Indians to camp and live according to what their website says verbatim. And the Redding Rancheria holds in its highest regard its tribal elders, especially the 17 tribal elders who they call their original distributees, 2 of which are Tyler McCain's descendants, Carol Hayward Timmons and Arthur Haywood. His great-grandfather, Tyler's grandfather, Orville Hayward, passed away January 31st of 2012, but grew up and was raised on the Redding Rancheria in Shasta County. He was of the Wintu Indian descent and a tribal elder. Orville was part of the original first tribal council, and he eventually helped to establish the Wind River Casino back in 1993. All of this is important. That's why I'm mentioning it. And that is the place, remember, where Nikki and Tyler met. Win for the Wintu tribe, and River to signify the 𝐏𝐢𝐳 connection. So the 2 tribes coming together and creating this casino. Tyler's mother, Jeanette Hayward, is one of Orville's 4 children and also a member of Redding Rancheria. Now, I find this part very interesting, and it's where I personally still am doing a lot of my research. One of my half-sisters is Native American. So that's one reason it interests me, but also because, as I said, this is a significant part of this case, and you will understand why, and that's why I'm going into this detail. Tyler's grandfather was employed as the facilities manager at Wind River Casino until he retired in 2002. And Tyler's mother, Jeanette, also worked there, and it was kind of like a family business, so to speak, and a big one. Tyler's family has a lot of power, being members of the Redding Rancheria, especially if you're part of the government. And at least 5 of Tyler's family members are part of the 7-member tribal administration. And with any government, these individuals are responsible for enforcing laws, managing resources within the jurisdiction, law enforcement, so there is a lot of power there. But when Nikki first met Tyler, he wasn't really her type. Looks-wise, they were opposites, Tyler with his light skin and his blue eyes, and Nikki with her olive skin and dark eyes. But they say that opposites attract. And Tyler was definitely interested in getting to know Nikki. Tyler worked in the slot section of the casino, and he was definitely known to be a flirt. It's not something he tried to hide, or maybe he wasn't able to hide it very well. And he didn't just flirt with Nikki. It seemed like he was quite the ladies' man and wasn't used to being told no or being turned down. Now, at the time, Nikki's sister Kay also worked at the casino with her, and she was well aware of Tyler. I'm sure many people were because of his connections to the reservation and also to the casino itself. But Kay had her doubts about Tyler, and she wasn't really sure if he was a match for her kind-hearted, free-spirited sister. At this point, Tyler had already been in trouble with the law, a felony burglary charge on his record. Remember who Nikki was. She had compassion for others even when they weren't doing their best. She saw the best in Tyler, who seemed to be very invested in making her his girl, and she gave him a chance and never looked back. But we can't really say the same about Tyler, but we'll get there. I already told you that Nikki wanted a family, so as soon as she started dating Tyler, she was already thinking about her future. And soon she was pregnant before they got a chance to get married. And in Nikki's culture, weddings are a huge deal. I mean, they are in many cultures, But it is a 3-day event and involved intense planning. Nikki really had her mind on more children because it wasn't easy for her to get pregnant the first time. And as a matter of fact, she and Tyler struggled with fertility. But eventually they went on to have 4 children, 3 girls almost back to back. But maybe she was waiting for her boy. And she finally got him in January of 2017. And he completed the McCain family. And they looked like a very happy, loving family, smiling in photo shoots on the beach, smiling for holiday photo shoots, and even in their everyday photos on Instagram and Facebook, where Nikki, like most of us, shared pieces of her life as a stay-at-home mom. She was great at it too. You can tell that she loved being a mother. It's like she was made for it. But I analyze things with a very careful eye, and I scrutinize details, especially in hindsight. And Tyler doesn't look that happy in the pictures. And you know what they say? A photo can say 1,000 words. But 2 come to my mind. Checked out. His gaze was often really vacant. While everyone else was genuinely smiling happily, Tyler just looked like a deer caught in the headlights. And if he did smile, it appeared forced. But of course, hindsight is 20/20. And I'm seeing these photos after everything I'm about to tell you. Tyler and Nikki had a rocky relationship. They weren't even officially married for years, and it took about 6 years of engagement for Tyler to finally commit officially. I mean, they were already living together like a married couple with children and all. But when it came time for the wedding, I don't know if it was what Nikki always dreamed of. Because instead of a grand affair, it was very low key. And why I'm mentioning this is because from what I read and what her sisters said, Nikki wasn't really the type that, did anything low-key. She went all out for every single holiday, making sure it was super special for her children. But what seemed to matter more at that point were the kids. They came first. So the wedding didn't matter as much. And sometimes I think there were subtle signs looking back because everything started to fall apart. Nikki had her suspicions that Tyler's player ways had never really stopped. His flirtatious personality, the attention-seeking that he always had, being a ladies' man, meant that Nikki lacked trust in him, and soon there were suspicions that Tyler wasn't being faithful. And Nikki, being the type of person she was, to always see the best in others, it took a lot for her to confront Tyler and accuse him of infidelity. But she finally did. And sadly, after a lot of pressuring and calling him out on things, he did finally admit he had been cheating. And honestly, that is the type of betrayal that not many people can come back from. If you have experienced it, and I have, it can be absolutely devastating, especially in a marriage. That's almost a deal breaker. I mean, it is a deal breaker for a lot of people, but Nikki was the forgiving type, maybe to a fault. Because after everything I know, I can say with confidence that she deserved better. She was way too good for this man. Just because Nikki didn't leave Tyler doesn't mean this wasn't a major issue in their relationship. It was a huge deal. It led to constant fights and even more of a lack of trust. But Nikki was determined to make things work, especially for their children. All the while from the outside, things between Tyler and Nikki looked normal, happy, and loving. If you looked at the curated feed and the well-put-together photo shoots, it can be very deceiving. Even Nikki's own sisters didn't know the extent to what was going on behind closed doors. They knew Nikki was struggling at times to get over the pain that she felt, but they never could have guessed what was really happening. But it all came to a head when the pandemic hit. So much changed for so many of us. And at that time, Nikki had been a stay-at-home mom while Tyler worked as a spa manager, which meant that they would have time away from one another during the day. But since many businesses had to close for COVID, Tyler was laid off. And now he and Nikki were in lockdown together in the same close quarters, day in and day out. The pandemic broke up a lot of marriages, and it seemed to bring out the worst in a lot of people, especially in Tyler. It put the relationship to the test. Being around someone 24/7 can be hard, especially when you're forced to be. And you can't release any stress because everything is closed down. You can't be with your friends. You can't get your escape like you usually do. I know my relationship at the time was put to the test and we didn't last. And I'm sure many of you have similar stories. I could truly relate to this, being under the same roof as someone you're already on thin ice with. And I can already guess some of the comments that I'm going to get from some of you because I'm already thinking them. What did Nikki see in this man? Honestly, what? I told you they lived in Happy Valley. Specifically, at a home at 17277 Olinda Road in a 3-bedroom, 3-bath home on 3.5 acres of land. Keep that in mind. That's a decent amount of land. Tyler worked on cars. He kept lots of them on the property, and most of them were not in working condition. To me, it reminded me of men, it can be women too, who won't get rid of something because they think, oh, I'll need this little piece of something one day, and I don't want to buy it later. But in turn, they hoard a bunch of useless items. Well, these were basically junk cars, but working on them was one of Tyler's passions. So they did have an attached 3-car garage as well as a designated area on the land where Tyler would go to play mechanic. I know this can be a stress reliever for some people, an outlet to blow off some steam, and Tyler seemed to be the type to fly off the handle. But there was more. During this time, during the pandemic, he started to act strange. His personality changed dramatically, which explained the glazed over eyes that I saw in some of those photos. And then I read what was going on. It started with his sister needing a place to stay. She was trying to get back on her feet and she'd been struggling with addiction, and Tyler opened up his garage or their garage for her to stay for the time being. That's not uncommon for a brother to be there for his sister. But over time, Nikki noticed that Tyler would disappear for hours at a time. And at first she thought maybe he was working on the cars or he was at his mom's house. But then she realized he was in the garage with his sister. Tyler was using meth. Now, that would be the ultimate game changer, deal breaker for a lot of people. Cheating and now substances, that's a lot. And now the arguments were not only about infidelity, they were about him becoming an addict and the way he was acting towards Nikki. Nothing good can come out of a situation like this, and Nikki was at her breaking point. She was finally, sadly, coming to terms with the fact that not only was Tyler not going to change, he didn't want to. He was only getting worse at this point. And I don't have details on whether Tyler was ever able to get help. But what we do know is that things got way worse for Nikki. And think about this. If the fights were bad before, and they were, unbeknownst to her family, they were already becoming physical. But think about after something like meth is introduced to a situation like this. Now, if you aren't aware, because to be honest, I wasn't until a while back, I did another case that involved it. There were a lot of side effects, some that the user chases and others they wish didn't exist, I'm sure. But it can make people feel energized at first. They'll suddenly feel awake and focused and want to get up and do things. It's even medically used under the supervision of a physician to help treat ADHD. Who wouldn't want more energy? I get it. And as a new mom, I'm practically falling asleep right now, but it's a sense of bliss that gets users hooked. I read this online at drugfree.org. Quote, it dramatically elevates dopamine, a chemical messenger associated with the brain's pleasure and reward system. If normal dopamine functioning is around 100 units, meth spikes it to 1,250 units, well above the pleasure derived from food, sex, alcohol, and cocaine, end quote. And it lasts anywhere from 8 to 12 hours from one hit. So I guess some may think that it would save them money if like they were used to doing something else as their choice of substance. But that's the problem. Once you get into it, there's a sick cycle that occurs, and users never want to come down because, let's face it, that doesn't feel good. So they end up using for weeks and weeks, and then finally their body just crashes. And when that happens, a person can experience intense mood swings. They also can become super paranoid and believe people are after them, even their own family and friends. They often feel hypersensitive, irritable, and impulsive. That is not a good combination for a man that Nikki is already in a toxic relationship with. That is definitely not something that's easy to fix. And something a lot of people don't know is that meth really messes with intimacy. It no longer can feel the same if you're not high. And to make it worse, when you're on it, you have an increased desire. So if Tyler was already cheating before, I have no doubt that things probably escalated in that area as well. And this can be devastating for a couple that's already trying to work things out and feel distant from one another. Nikki knew she needed to make a big decision and leave, but it's not easy. Not for someone like her that sees the best in others, and not for anyone. You still love the old version of the person you're with, and you hope that old version will reappear. And a lot of times they will make promises that they will. Tyler made promise after promise to Nikki, but he kept breaking them. And then things got increasingly physical to the point where Nikki was scared for her life. And when they argued, she would grab the kids and lock herself in a bathroom so Tyler couldn't get to them. Her sole focus became the children and their safety, and she knew she needed an escape plan. Tyler had created a hell that she was now living in, and this was supposed to be a very promising life. One of the other issues was that no one knew this was going on. Nikki was in quarantine like most of us were. She wasn't visiting her sisters and her family like she did before, so the bruising and the wounds, they were hidden. But finally, as the restrictions were lifted, Nikki made her way back over to see Kay and Chloe, and they were shocked. You could tell right away that she had been harmed, and that's when they insisted that she go to the police. She needed to report Tyler for what he had done, but Nikki was also heartbroken. Of course she knew that what he did was wrong, but there was a part of her that didn't want to get him in trouble. And that's tough. And it's sometimes hard for people to understand, and they'll judge these situations that they haven't been in before. And I didn't want to forget to mention this. They did try marriage counseling here and there, but it never seemed to change anything. And honestly, with meth being in the picture now, I don't think counseling alone would have helped. But it's not as though Nikki hadn't tried either. She had called 911 on several different occasions. The police came out to the house, and they would be there to make a report that Tyler was hurting her. But it's like, in the moment, it seemed like she was confident that she wanted him to go to jail and get in trouble and be arrested. But when law enforcement got there, Nikki and Tyler would be calm at that point, and things had settled down, and she didn't want to file any charges against him. However, because of what was going on in that house between the meth, the physical harm, and the allegations, word got to those in power in the tribal court. And in 2021, the decision was made to take Nikki's 4 children away and place them in Tyler's family's custody. Now that hurt my heart. Why? Why not remove the real issue here? Because we know it's Tyler. Why not take Tyler away instead of taking these children away from their mother and then placing them with his family? Well, remember when I was explaining a part of how Tyler's family was in power, part of the tribal court? That could have been one of the reasons. I explained that his family's connection to the reservation and the power they held, his aunt being on the tribal council, she was one of the people who made that final decision in cases like this. Even Tyler's mom began making decisions of her own in this situation and prohibiting Nikki from seeing her own children. I can only imagine how sad that would have been for Nikki. There were times that Jeanette, that's Tyler's mom, would become what I think I read hysterical, that was the word that was used, when Nikki merely wanted to see them. And it got to the point where Jeanette called the police and actually pressed charges against Nikki. This incident stemmed from a time where Nikki and Jeanette got into it. She wanted to take the kids, and it got heated. And Jeanette called the cops, and she did not hesitate to make sure there was a record against Nikki. And that's crushing because Nikki had spared Jeanette's own son, Tyler. Time and time again, she didn't press charges. But now here's Tyler's mom, and she's making Nikki out to be the aggressor and the one responsible in this mess. And eventually, Nikki's sister and her family were granted shared custody of the children, but it didn't come without them fighting to be a part of the kids' lives. But Nikki was still living with Tyler at this point, just without the kids, and I couldn't help but think, without witnesses. I understand they were all very young, but they still know and can corroborate things. But now Nikki was even more isolated. But she would still leave from time to time, especially when things were not going well with Tyler. And this happened more and more, and she would go to her mom's or her sister's houses. Nikki and Tyler would get into fights. She would leave for a few days, but then Tyler always knew where she would be. And he would text or call her sisters, begging them to please tell Nikki to just come home and that he's so sorry. And I was kind of surprised when her sisters explained in an interview that Tyler was pretty convincing. In these moments, he was calm, cool, and collected. He wasn't in a violent rage. He wasn't acting erratic. So it was believable when he promised this would be the last time and he would change. This is classic signs of DARVO, which is an acronym for the reaction from people like Tyler, especially in instances of DV. DARVO stands for Deny, Attack, Reverse Victim and Offender, and I think it is self-explanatory, but there were signs. Let's flash forward to Friday, December 1st of 2023. Nikki was sitting in a hospital bed at Mercy Hospital being interviewed by an officer from the sheriff's department, and she was lucky to be alive. I have this entire document. I know some of you, like me, I like people to read these things because I don't have time to sit there and read every word. And let's face it, I'm sure a lot of you don't have time either. That's why I'm here. If you want to skip this part, I made chapter markers for that reason, so you can go where you want in the story. And I will also do a short recap afterward, so you can skip ahead or you can hear the entire report. But I'm going to read it to you. The report time was at 7:10 p.m. on December 1st of 2023. And this is written by Officer Jerry M. Mall, and it states, on Friday, 12/1/2023, at 23:12 hours, so that would be 11:12 p.m., I responded to Mercy Hospital in Redding, California, to make contact with a female who shall be referred in this report as confidential victim. Side note, that person is actually Nikki McCain, so just be aware of that. The purpose of the contact was for a reported domestic violence incident involving herself and her husband of 13 years, Tyler McCain. This occurred on 11/23/2023 between the hours of 20:30 and 23:30, so 8:30 and 11:30 p.m. at their listed address on Olinda Road in Anderson, California. It should be noted that the original call of the report came in at or around 7:10 p.m. on the date of December 1st of 2023. Upon coming on duty later that evening, I attempted phone contact with confidential victim, but was told by her friend she was currently being treated in the ER and not able to speak to me. In making contact with confidential victim at the hospital, I immediately noticed facial trauma to both of her eyes, as well as her forehead and facial areas. Both of her eyes were blackened severely. Both were also swollen in what appeared to be the result of a physical assault. I asked confidential victim who did this to her. She stated it was her husband, Tyler McCain. Using my department-issued iPhone, I recorded a conversation and asked confidential victim to explain to me what occurred. She relayed the following in summary. Confidential victim stated, on Wednesday, 11/29/2023, she returned home to her address on Olinda Road, a residence she shared with her husband, Tyler McCain. She said they had been together and married for approximately 16 years and have 4 children in common, none of whom live with them currently. Getting back to the night of the incident, confidential victim stated when she got home at around 20:15 to 20:30, which is 8:15 to 8:30 p.m., Tyler was not home. Confidential victim went into her bedroom and started combing her hair. When approximately 15 minutes later, Tyler returned home in a strange mood and for some reason went and locked the back door of the house. Confidential victim stated that for unknown reasons, Tyler seemed extremely agitated and was not making any sense. When he contacted her in the bedroom area, she said he immediately jumped on her, held her down on the ground and dragged her around, yelled at her and asked her, "What's going on? What are you doing?" Confidential victim stated Tyler had a glazed, scary look in his eyes, as if he was having some sort of mental episode. Confidential victim tried to calm Tyler down, but to no avail, and he continued to torment her verbally, as well as hold her down, and began to repeatedly hit her in the face. Confidential victim stated that Tyler's behavior began to grow more and more intense towards her, hitting her in the facial area with his open hands in a harsh, forceful manner. She said in addition to hitting her face, her eyes, and her cheek areas, he also pulled her hair numerous times and even poured large amounts of water onto her from a water jug that was sitting beside her, causing her to become very cold. Confidential victim stated this behavior by Tyler continued for approximately 3 hours, during which time he bound her ankles and wrists together with white tape. He also placed a piece of tape over her mouth so she could not speak properly. Confidential victim stated part of the tape was not covering her mouth fully, so she was able to breathe, though she could not speak. During this time, confidential victim stated Tyler turned her over onto her stomach and straddled her from behind, pulled on her hair, and forcefully pulled her head back, saying he was going to kill her. I asked confidential victim what state of mind she was in at that moment. Confidential victim said she thought she was going to die, that Tyler may actually intend to kill her. Throughout the evening, Tyler periodically hit her as she laid on the ground. Confidential victim said one time Tyler attempted to wrap something around her neck, but was not successful in doing that. I asked confidential victim what type of object Tyler used to wrap around her neck. She said she was not sure. She didn't see it, only that she felt it. In looking at confidential victim's neck, I did not notice any specific strangle or choke marks that could be attributed to an attempted strangling. In looking at the eyes of the confidential victim, it was clearly evident she had been struck numerous times, with her injuries suggesting they came at the hands of being struck by another human being. It should also be noted, confidential victim is a small person at 4'11" and 90 pounds in stature. Tyler is substantially larger and stronger than she is, and there would be no way for her to fend him off in a fit of rage during the assault. Confidential victim said that Tyler has done this type of thing before, but never this bad. During my interview with her, confidential victim said she was not sure about Tyler's illegal drug use, but believed he used methamphetamine periodically. I asked confidential victim after the approximately 3-hour ordeal how it ended. She stated, towards the end of the night, around 11:30 or so, Tyler went into the kitchen area where he remained for several minutes. Believing this was the opportunity for her to escape, confidential victim grabbed her robe that contained her car keys, ran outside, and got into her vehicle. She said as she was leaving, Tyler came running out after her and jumped on the hood of her car, telling her to stop, which she ignored. I asked confidential victim if Tyler sexually assaulted her during the incident in any way, and she said he did not. After leaving her residence, confidential victim went to her sister's house in Redding, where she has been staying ever since, and eventually made the report to law enforcement. I asked confidential victim to describe the punches Tyler hit her with. She said it was not really a fist, more of an open hand, and that he hit her 10 to 15 times in her facial area, including her eyes and forehead. Confidential victim could not see what he used to wrap her neck, but believed he may have been trying to suffocate her. Confidential victim said she has not spoken to Tyler since, and he has not called her. No one else was at the residence when this incident occurred, and there were no witnesses to contact. Photos of the injuries to confidential victim, as well as the medical release form, were signed and will be added to this report. The photos will be booked into evidence after they are transferred to a CD-ROM. My recorded interview with confidential victim will also be converted to CD-ROM and later booked into evidence. At this time, confidential victim will no longer be living at the Olinda Road address and will be staying for the foreseeable future with her sister in Redding. Confidential victim was advised to go to one safe place in Redding at her earliest convenience to get assistance in obtaining a restraining order against Tyler. She was also provided a Marcy's card. By the way, this is a card that is given to victims that explains California Victims' Bill of Rights Act of 2008, and this is a constitutional amendment that provides victims of crime with the rights to justice and due process, including the right to be treated with fairness and respect and protection from the defendant, and notification of court proceedings. But back to the report. She was also provided with a victim of violent crimes pamphlet, a report number, and my contact information in case she had any questions or concerns. After speaking to confidential victim, myself and assisting deputies responded to Olinda Road to contact Tyler McCain. Upon responding to that location, Tyler subsequently came out of the residence and met us in the driveway. Tyler was taken into custody without incident, placed in handcuffs that were double locked and checked for proper fit. He was then placed in the back of a sheriff's office patrol vehicle and transported to jail without incident. Prior to being transported, I informed Tyler he was being placed under arrest for domestic violence, as well as other charges for the injuries sustained by confidential victim during a domestic violence incident. At the jail, I read Tyler his Miranda rights from my card issued to me by the Shasta County District Attorney's Office. Tyler verbally stated to me he understood his rights and agreed to speak to me regarding this incident. I first confirmed confidential victim was in fact Tyler's wife. He stated she was, and that they had been together for 13 years now. I asked Tyler if he was aware of the injuries his wife, confidential victim, had upon her face and body areas. Tyler said he was aware of them, but that he did not actually see them. He said the last time he saw his wife was on the 29th, during evening hours around 8 p.m. When I asked if there was any kind of disturbance between them, he said no, there was not. Tyler then told me that he believed his wife had gotten into a fight with another female. Now, I want to stop here for context. Tyler is alleging that Nikki was in a lesbian affair with another woman and that she got into an altercation with her side girlfriend. Okay, Tyler. Anyway, back to the document. He said That's how she received the injuries that she currently has upon her body. I asked Tyler if he saw the fight take place, and he said he did not. Tyler's statement sounded inconsistent, saying that he believed the confidential victim was having an affair with another female, but then went on to say that they got along great and have been together as a happy couple, never having any type of physical altercations between them. When I again asked Tyler if he saw the fight between confidential victim and this alleged female, or if he saw the injuries that she had upon her face, he said he did not. I informed Tyler his wife, confidential victim, reported him as being the person who caused her numerous and visible injuries to her face during a violent encounter at their shared residence on Olinda Road on 11/29/23. Tyler said he did not strike confidential victim in any way and did not know how she received the injuries that she was treated for at the hospital. Based on the totality of their circumstances and based on the fact that the injuries upon confidential victim were consistent with that of a domestic violence incident, I informed Tyler he was being charged with 273.5 PC, felony domestic violence, as well as false imprisonment PC 236, a felony, and PC 422A, terrorist threats, also a felony. The domestic violence-related charges stem from the fact I observed physical injuries upon confidential victim she sustained at the hands of Tyler McCain, her husband. The false imprisonment is due to the fact confidential victim stated Tyler bound both of her hands and legs with tape, preventing her from leaving the house. The PC 422A terrorist threats are for the fact Tyler threatened to kill confidential victim numerous times during the course of the incident and was in great fear for her own safety and well-being. This concluded my contact with Tyler, and he was booked on the listed charges. Prior to transporting Tyler to jail, I was given permission by both confidential victim earlier at the hospital and by suspect Tyler McCain to enter residence and retrieve confidential victim's cell phones. During the cursory safety search of the residence, 5 firearms were found inside the bedroom area in plain view where both Tyler and confidential victim reside. Tyler is not a convicted felon and is not prohibited from owning firearms, but a records check revealed that one of the firearms, an AK-47 style rifle, was reported to be stolen out of Oregon. That rifle, as well as the other ones, were taken for safekeeping and later entered into evidence as recovered stolen property and for safekeeping. Sergeant 𝐑𝐞𝐝𝐲 collected the firearms along with ammunition and booked them into Shasta County ID Lab. Tyler McCain was later served with a receipt of the property at the jail that he signed in my presence that will be downloaded and added to this report. I also looked for the type of white tape that confidential victim reported as being tied up by Tyler with, lying on the floor in the bedroom area, but did not observe any in plain view. This report will be forwarded to the district attorney's office with the listed charges that, based on the totality of the circumstances in this incident, show that Tyler McCain was the primary aggressor in this matter. The case status was closed and forwarded to district attorney's office for review. Okay, that's the end of the report, and I know that was a lot. But I know some of you wanted to skip it, and I understand that. So to recap, Nikki finally sought treatment for the harm caused by Tyler one night on November 29th of 2023. It was around 8:15 to 8:30 that night. He came home in an erratic mood and began attacking her. He ended up binding her hands and legs at one point and even got on her back and tried to tie something around her neck while she was lying on her stomach, and he was straddling her so she could not get up at all. And he continued striking her in the face over and over again, and she thought she was going to die. But she managed to escape when he went to the kitchen for a few minutes, and she made a run for it and grabbed a robe that she knew had her car keys inside. She then fled to her mother's house, and eventually, in the days that followed, her sisters came over to visit, saw the state that she was in, and they were shocked and told her that, she had 2 black eyes. Her sister said it was so bad, she was unrecognizable. And it was at that point they were very worried for her safety and well-being in that moment, and I get it. That's where they could actually see what was going on, and there were things that they might not have been able to see. They could have thought she had internal injuries for all they knew. So they begged her to go to the hospital to get treatment, and Nikki finally exposed the truth. Tyler had been harming her for years, and this was just the latest episode. I personally feel like with the facts from that report, it was attempted murder. From the bindings to him attempting to put something around her neck, sitting on her, this will matter later on, for sure. But I'm just giving you my opinion from reading all this. If someone is unrecognizable, to the point of it being so severe. If she hadn't fled, who knows what would have happened to her? Well, we do. We know. She would have died. She would have been dead. Her sisters realized even after days passed, Nikki's face was still so swollen and black. They thought that she was almost beaten to death, in their words. They saw some light at the end of the tunnel, though, because Nikki had finally been brave enough to report Tyler, and he was finally arrested and taken into custody. But of course, he told a much different story. That Nikki was the one cheating with a woman, and they, the woman and her, are the ones that had an altercation, not him. And that is so far-fetched. Could it be true? Sure. But I think Occam's razor applies here. That is the simplest explanation is usually the truth. Not always, but usually. And those who knew Nikki knew that Tyler was the problem. At this point, Nikki's next step was that she was to report to a facility called One Safe Place, where she could get assisted in obtaining a restraining order against Tyler. Now, I've heard really good things about this nonprofit. They truly help in having a crisis hotline, a crisis intervention in person that you can be a part of, restraining order assistance, and even emergency shelter and housing for victims. Nikki was safe for a while, but this cycle is hard to break. They'd known each other for nearly half their lives at this point. I mean, 16 years, that's a really long time. And Tyler had a way of creeping back into her life. And I wish the next part wasn't true, but Tyler now had a court date for the exact charges that Nikki filed against him. Now, I'm assuming she did not have a restraining order yet or hadn't filed it, or I don't know if she ever did. And some may wonder why. Well, I hate to say this, but a lot of times they don't work anyway. And sometimes they instigate even more violence. But I can't tell you those details because I could not find them. However, what I can tell you is that the court date was approaching, and somehow Tyler, the guy with many cars in his possession, albeit junk cars, can't drive. But he can't drive them because he had a suspended license, not that he didn't have a vehicle to use. His license was suspended, I believe, because of the gun charges, but in any case, he called Nikki, of all people, and I wonder why. Well, not just because he probably knew how to manipulate her into getting what he wanted, but it was what he really wanted. You just wait. He asked her, "Can you please give me a ride to court because, you're the one who got me into this mess, sir? Have you looked in the mirror? It's you. You got yourself here." We know how kind Nikki is, and time had passed. They'd been away from each other. Things had cooled down. Who knows what Tyler promised this time, but Nikki agreed to drive him. However, Tyler had other plans that included not the courthouse, but his own personal defense attorney's office, because that's where Nikki found herself that day. He had her drive right into the parking lot of his own attorney's office, where she was then persuaded to drop all the charges against Tyler. What an asshole. That is so controlling. This is the type of guy he was. But Nikki stood up for herself. She actually refused, and Tyler wasn't having it. He ran, he got into her car, and he took off, leaving Nikki behind. I don't know how this was resolved. That information was sparse. But what I do know is the pressure was on. Tyler, he would make all kinds of promises to Nikki if she would just drop the charges. And I wondered, what kind of fines or jail time would he be facing? Because he seemed very hell-bent on not being charged and not going to court. So I was curious and I looked up the statutes related to the crimes in California. So far, for just 273.5 PC, felony DV, that conviction can result in 2 to 6 years in state prison. These offenses are also what's considered 3-strike offenses. So if you have one, it only takes 2 more of these instances, and you can be facing up to 25 years to life in state prison. Yikes. So that alone would be a lot of time. And this was the state prosecuting Tyler, not the tribal court. He didn't have any power in this. And then for the false imprisonment PC 236 charge, if convicted, a person can spend up to 3 years in state prison and a fine of $10,000. And lastly, statute PC 422A, terrorist threats. This has a punishment of up to 1 year in county jail and a $1,000 fine. So putting that all together, Tyler was looking at possibly significant jail time And I'm sure there were plenty of witnesses to back up what Nikki had gone through. And as a matter of fact, people had come forward. One neighbor said they saw Nikki running barefoot from her house. Her feet were bloodied. Apparently, later we find out it was from Tyler breaking some glass that she had to walk over. There were marks on her neck when this neighbor saw her. Then another neighbor said they saw Tyler chasing her through the yard with a wrench and actually heard him say he was going to cut her head off. Now, this terrified me because I don't know if you've ever heard of the 𝐑𝐤𝐳 business case. She literally did that to a guy she was hanging out with while she was on meth. All I could really think about was poor Nikki in this instance, because now there's proof people saw him and heard him threatening her in that way. But at least at this point, Nikki was staying with her mother and her sisters. That is until a few months later in the spring of 2023. It was near the end of March, beginning of April, when Tyler's convincing finally worked this time. He was using the kids as bait. He said, listen, Nikki, if we can just get along, we can just work on our relationship, we can get the kids back. And you know that she wanted her kids. And it's his aunt sitting on the tribal council. It's his mother with shared custody. So Nikki complied. And she moved back into the marital home in Happy Valley with Tyler. Mind you, those charges were still pending. Tyler's preliminary hearing on those charges was set for May 7th of 2024. And his court date, and I want you to remember these dates, was set for July 2nd of 2024. So Tyler had a year to convince Nikki not to go through with it. And Nikki was at the very least willing to try to make it work with Tyler, but she didn't drop the charges. And of course, those close to her were worried. Of course they were. They hated this for her. But she is a grown woman. She can do as she pleases, as she will. And maybe she did think, if I get the children back, then I could finally leave Tyler for good and be done with it. I could see that being the plan in her mind. Play nice, get along with him, get the kids back, and then get the out of here. But she would never get that chance. Because less than a year after she moved back in with Tyler, Nikki would go missing. Not just on a random date either. No, just about 10 days after Tyler's preliminary hearing, where he pleaded not guilty to the charges that were still pending against him. Nikki never dropped them. But if she would be unable to make it to the court date, then the judge would have to drop the charges. Sounds like quite a coincidence, doesn't it? That she just disappeared. I don't think it's a coincidence. Could it be? Sure, anything's possible. But we're going to get into some theories. And of course, I'm open to what you think because I have no idea. No one does. Only Nikki truly knows what happened. And of course, if someone else was involved, which it seems like they were, since this is now a homicide, they share that secret. For now, anyway. At that point, Tyler, he goes to that hearing, and Nikki actually texted her sister Chloe that same day, and she said she was going to seek a divorce. She was exhausted dealing with all the bullshit that she had to put up with Tyler. He hadn't changed. He wasn't changing. Another year had gone by, and they still didn't have their kids back. She wanted out. So much so, she started looking for apartments, and she even started looking for furniture for her new place once she moved out on her own. And this makes me so angry. She was making moves. She was trying to leave, and that's the most dangerous time for a woman in a relationship with an abuser, when they're trying to get away from them. And Tyler had tried everything. I mean, he even got her a new to her 2002 metallic gray Chevy Avalanche truck just recently. And you know he always had cars coming and going because he liked working on them. He even drove at least 2 different vehicles himself. But a gift and promises, that was not enough to keep Nikki there. She was determined to leave. So let's jump to May 12th of 2024. That's the last time anyone in Nikki's family physically saw her in person. And then a few days later, on May 17th, Nikki allegedly, and why I'm saying this, number one, we know it's an ongoing investigation, so we say allegedly. But you also have to take into account anyone can use our devices to text, to use social media. It doesn't mean that it was really Nikki any time after she'd been last seen. But because we don't have any evidence yet that's out in the public anyway of CCTV footage, this is what we have to work with. But on May 17th of 2024, Nikki had allegedly been spending time at Jeanette's house, this is Tyler's mom, maybe to visit the kids. And I just wanted to point something out. This house is located in the Redding Rancheria, on the reservation, within the jurisdiction of the tribal council. It's tribal land. It's actually right next to the Wind River Casino. It's a gated compound right next to the parking lot for the corporate offices of the casino. It also has a creek and lots of land behind it. The closest I could get to a view of the back and that creek and the land was in this position with my Google Man on this spot at the casino and back. But as you can see, if you're watching, you can't see much. But online I was able to find some pictures of this creek, and it is quite large. I'm mentioning this because, well, it's one of the last places that Nikki was allegedly at before she disappeared. Her mother-in-law's house, where she had faced tensions before. But let's move on, because there's more. Well, apparently, and according to Tyler's mom, Tyler, and Tyler's family, Nikki, Tyler, and Jeanette were all together at Jeanette's, and they decided to get into Jeanette's car together and drive over to Mercy Hospital, where Tyler's older brother, Brian, was in critical condition. Now, medical records are obviously private. I can only tell you what I've heard was going on. But before I do, let me tell you who Brian McCain was. He's not exactly an upstanding citizen. Well, it's official record, so why don't I just read it to you? This is a public notice from the sheriff's office from back on March 5th of 2021. It reads, on Friday, March 5th, 2021, at 8:20 hours, Julie Mitchell with Holly bail bonds called the Shasta County Sheriff's Office to report the location of a wanted subject. Mitchell reported she was attempting to contact Brian Scott McCain, 40 years old, of Redding, due to his failure to appear in court on his bond. While Mitchell was speaking with McCain, he made odd statements and threatened to kill everyone at the Wind River Casino. Mitchell also spoke with McCain's family members who reside with McCain, and they reported he was becoming aggressive and threatening to kill everyone inside the residence. The Shasta County Sheriff's Office was familiar with McCain and has received numerous recent calls for service concerning reports of him shooting a rifle inside a residence, threats to harm Wind River Casino staff, statements of suicide by cop, and reports of him walking around the casino property with firearms and knives. McCain also had an active felony warrant out of Tehama County, please remember that county, for violently resisting an officer. The California Highway Patrol airship and a CAL FIRE law officer assisted deputies when they arrived outside the residence at 1961 Redding Rancheria Road in Redding, California, located behind the Wind River Casino, which is another house, I just want to mention this, where the McCains own on the tribal reservation. Deputies met with the family and they reported McCain was continuing to act erratic inside the residence, and they left the residence because they did not feel safe around him. Deputies attempted to call McCain out of the residence using the public announcement speaker from a patrol vehicle. After multiple calls for McCain to exit the residence and surrender peacefully, he was spotted by the CHP airship overhead, running out of the back of the residence away from the deputies along a canal and towards a residential neighborhood. Deputies gave chase and located McCain in the backyard of a residence on the 1800 block of Red Bank Road. Once located, McCain was held at gunpoint, but continued to be non-compliant with deputies. When additional deputies arrived on scene, McCain became compliant and was taken into custody without further incident. McCain was arrested and booked into the Shasta County Jail on a fresh charge of 148A1 PC, resisting arrest, and on his felony warrant. That is the end of that report. So there is a highlight of Brian McCain, Tyler's brother. And also I did some digging on Facebook. It's always nice to get the community's perspective on people they have dirt and information on. And this is also just alleged, of course, but this comment was from a guy familiar with this incident, and he said, threatening his family and Wind River with assault weapons, fired shots into a residence on Rancheria, had about 15 law enforcement as residents, spent 2 months in jail, got out, just had a probation check and assault weapon, plenty of ammo, and just to top it off, meth. This place is not a safe place to live, but where is? That was the end of that comment, and I'm highlighting that one because it paints a picture of someone that is not a stranger to law enforcement. And here was a comment by another guy that said, quote, and just think, he was a Redding Rancheria tribal council and is from a high-ranking family in the pecking order for Redding Rancheria tribal members. They're well-known in law enforcement. Just look up the names in Shasta County. Yes, meth makes people do terrible things, but there's a time when you have to pay for those crimes, not be let out 3 times till something really heinous happens, end quote. That's interesting. And I wanted to fact check all this because according to Wikipedia, and that's not always the best source, I know that, but I saw the names of tribal council, and I didn't recall Brian McCain being one of them. But the word was makes a difference. And sure enough, I found records from 2011 where it mentioned that Brian McCain was elected treasurer of the tribal council. And then I was able to pull up this State of the Tribe publication from Redding Rancheria in 2013 and 2014. And Brian McCain was 100% part of the tribal council. There he is in the orange shirt. And to think that would be an orange jumpsuit later. Oh dear. It's off topic, I guess, but in the same publication, I saw Tyler McCain in the small business grant section, shaking hands with a guy holding a check. And it read, Redding Rancheria provides grant funding to eligible tribal members to promote and encourage entrepreneur and economic self-reliance. In 2013 and 14, 13 tribal members received grants. Well, I was wondering, was Tyler one of them? Because it looks like it. I mean, this was years before all the drama seemed to start in Nikki and Tyler's relationship as far as we know. But now you know a little more about his brother, Brian. And apparently something caused his lungs to get to the point of having to be admitted to the ICU in critical condition. And I'm speculating here, but I've heard from my research that smoking certain things can cause that to happen. But, that's just my speculation. This was very heartbreaking for Jeanette, according to what was relayed to others, and she couldn't even drive herself to the hospital that night. She was in such a wreck over the possibility of losing her son. So like I was saying, she, Tyler, and Nikki rode together in Jeanette's vehicle to the hospital. I would love to see CCTV footage to prove that Nikki was there. Maybe she was, but that's something that I would like to see. But all the while, Nikki or her phone, because remember, we don't know if it was Nikki texting or someone else using her device to text others, but Nikki was texting Chloe, giving her updates on Brian's condition. And to be fair, Chloe does believe that this was Nikki at the time. Sometimes loved ones can tell the style of texting and there were no red flags at the time. Now, this next part can be very confusing. It's still confusing to me, but I kind of know what's going on here. There is a theory of what Nikki's sisters think could have happened. There's a lot of theories, but in this time frame, 2 text messages are going to occur, one at 11:30 and one at 12:35. So one at the end of the night and the early morning hours of the next day. So May 17th to May 18th. Without the context of the theory, the text messages can seem odd. I'm going to tell you what the 2 texts were, and then we're going to circle back to the theory that's going to make it kind of make sense. The first text message came in at approximately 11:30 p.m. Nikki sent a text to her sister Chloe, and it was very brief, and it was stating that she was driving the Chevy Tahoe that belonged to her mother-in-law, Jeanette. That would be confusing. Why is she telling her that? Why is she mentioning this vehicle? There are some other theories about why, or if it was even her. We'll get to that. The second text message came in about an hour later at 12:35 a.m. And this was the last communication that anyone had with Nikki. She texted Chloe again to let her know she was driving from her and Tyler's house to Jeanette's to drop off Jeanette's car. So keep those 2 text messages in mind. Okay, I'm going to put them up on the screen. This is not verbatim. It's just showing you the messages so that you kind of remember what I'm about to talk about. If you were to get these 2 messages and you're trying to put together what's occurring, you know that allegedly Tyler, Nikki, and Jeanette got together in her Chevy Tahoe from her house and drove to the hospital in a rush, frantically trying to get there. Brian's in the ICU. So what would make sense is that Nikki was, quickly shooting her sister a text like, hey, I'm driving the Tahoe. Then she tells her, hey, I'm driving the Tahoe back to Jeanette's, as in dropping it off. So allegedly, Nikki and Jeanette were at the hospital until about midnight. Now we're into May 18th, the early morning hours. Where was Tyler? We don't know. Was he gone or did he stay at the hospital? Because from the information that we have public, it appears that only Nikki and Jeanette left at this time. Maybe Jeanette, still in a state of shock because of the devastation of her son's condition, Nikki drove her home. Now that's about a 15-minute drive. I have it mapped out, and there has got to be cameras because this is right near the casino. And again, I would love to see that because they'd have to drive right in front of the parking lot to get to Jeanette's place. Here's where things get a bit fuzzy and confusing because first of all, how did Nikki originally get to Jeanette's? If she was there with her husband, did they drive together in his car and then they left his car at Jeanette's as well? And if so, wouldn't that mean that a vehicle would be left behind for Nikki to take home? Were they dropped off by someone? Why? When they have multiple vehicles to use, why would someone drop them off at Jeanette's house? If Tyler's license is suspended, that means Nikki would be driving, so wouldn't Nikki's vehicle be at Jeanette's? Keep these things in mind. Just keep them in your mind. I know these kind of videos can get frustrating, but leave it in the comments. What do you think? This is ongoing. But my biggest question is who took Nikki and Tyler, if they even went to Jeanette's, to her house? Because the next part doesn't seem to make sense. But at 12:35 a.m. came that last communication, as I mentioned. The text to Chloe that Nikki was going to drive to Jeanette's house to drop off Jeanette's car. But think about that for a minute. She goes from the hospital, drops Jeanette off at Jeanette's house. Apparently, there's no other vehicle there for Nikki to take home. So she takes Jeanette's Chevy Tahoe back to her and Tyler's. But then at some point she goes, oh, I'm going to have to take Jeanette's car back in the middle of the night. Why? Confusing, but I do have a theory and so do a lot of other people. And then I was thinking, does the timeline add up? Well, let's see. They leave the hospital at, let's say, midnight. Nikki drives to Jeanette's, that's 15 minutes. She, let's say, doesn't go inside, just drives straight home after that. That's another 12 minutes or so. Then maybe she goes inside and something, we don't know what because we don't have the text messages, something, maybe Tyler or Jeanette had a conversation with her that Jeanette needs the car. Maybe she has somewhere she has to be with the kids in the morning. I don't know. Or in case Brian's condition got worse that night and Jeanette wanted to leave to go see him again. Whatever it was, the only thing that makes a little bit of sense is there was some kind of urgency to get Jeanette's car back to Jeanette's in the middle of the night. But whatever it was so important that Nikki, who has been at the hospital for hours, she drove Jeanette's car back to her house. What if she did that? Who was driving Nikki back home? Because now she's in the same situation where she's back at Jeanette's with no car. The road you would take between these two houses passes a bunch of businesses. So again, I would love to see footage or ring camera from that area showing Jeanette's car, if that's the case. Because you would think that she was communicating with Tyler or Jeanette this whole time. Wouldn't she be letting her husband know? Like, I need a ride home. I'm stuck here. Where are you? When are you coming back? The communication had to be going on. Right? It also sounds like it could be an alibi timeline, a fake timeline, something to make it look like something bad happened to Nikki when she left her and Tyler's house that early morning and she was never seen again because she was never seen or heard from after this. Chloe wasn't even awake when that text came through. She responded the next morning, not really thinking much of it at the time. She never got a response. She was actually taking care of one of Nikki's daughters who had a soccer game that morning on May 18th, just hours after Nikki's last text. And that morning, Chloe is searching for her niece's jersey for the soccer game and they can't find it. So they suspect maybe it was left at Jeanette's since she also has shared custody of the girls. Chloe's fiance and their niece go over to Jeanette's to get the jersey. And while they're there, the fiance has small talk with Jeanette. And you know what she mentions? That Tyler spent the night at the hospital with Brian. So here's the first version of where Tyler was that night, with Brian at the hospital. And when someone says someone spends the night, to me, that means they were there all night and in the morning they left. But you just wait. This would also mean that Nikki was alone when she drove Jeanette home and then would need a ride back home after she dropped off the car. I hope all this is making sense. I know it is a lot. Jeanette also mentioned that she was too sad to stay at the hospital, so she didn't stick around and went home. She even said things like, I can't believe that I'm going to lose my son and that he's going to die. Now, I do not think he died, but the day progressed as usual, except Nikki wasn't texting in her group chat she had with her sisters, which wasn't that weird at first until the next day on March 19th. That's when Tyler actually texted 𝐂𝐲. And I think it's interesting that he chose to text 𝐂𝐲, the same person Nikki supposedly last texted, the same person she'd been texting at the hospital. I don't know. That seems significant to me, but maybe she was the closest to her sister 𝐂𝐲. I don't know. However, Tyler asked 𝐂𝐲 if Nikki was with her. She wasn't, and she let Tyler know that. And this still didn't raise any red flags because Nikki jumped around a lot, especially if her and Tyler got into an argument. And they assumed that they did because Nikki did what she always did. She would leave and she would go to stay with her mom or another sister. That had been the routine for years, and recall that Tyler would call the sisters, trying to see where Nikki was and trying to get on her good side again. He did this all the time, every time they had a fight. And that became normal, so it didn't set off any alarms. What did set off alarms were ominous green text messages that came from Nikki's iPhone. We all know, we've all seen them. When they turn green, something happened. The phone is off, it doesn't have service, and that definitely stands out, especially when you haven't heard from your loved one in a few days. What was going on? It was now May 21st, and the texts were all green. They hadn't had contact with Nikki since that last text message in the middle of the night on the 18th. And then 𝐂𝐲 gets another text from Tyler. This time he says, have you heard from your sister? I think she's missing. First of all, the fact he doesn't say Nikki's name. He doesn't say, have you heard from Nikki? That right there is what is called distancing language. And then he doesn't even call? If he really thought that Nikki was missing, wouldn't that be a phone call type of conversation? Who would text that? It was a lot to take in. After everything Nikki had been through, this was a very heartbreaking moment where her sisters truly thought that something bad could have happened. They wanted to understand what Tyler meant. What do you mean she's missing? Why would she be missing? Well, he explained that he stayed at the hospital till about 1:30 or 2 a.m. So I'm going to be keeping track of all this. This is what he said. Apparently his sister came to pick him up and take him home. My first thought was like, that wasn't that long to stay after Nikki and his mom supposedly left. Why didn't he just leave with them? But I understand. His brother was in the hospital. I get it. He probably wanted to stay as long as he could, until maybe you get super tired. And now he's saying his sister drove him back to where him and Nikki lived. He said when he got there, Nikki wasn't there. This won't be Tyler's only version of the events, but his first version, he said he found out that Nikki was still at his mom's house since she had driven the car over to return it to her. And he drove over there and picked her up. And he also had a witness, his friend Justin, also known by his nickname, Too Tall. Too Tall lives in a trailer on Nikki and Tyler's property. And he says he went with him to his mom's house to go get Nikki. Why? That was my first thought. Why? Why do you need a chaperone to go 12 minutes to go get your wife at 2 a.m.? Tyler says when he arrives that Nikki and him get into an argument over what, I don't know. He wasn't specific. If this is even true. Maybe it was. Maybe she was mad that she was stranded for a couple hours and driving back and forth. Everyone has a cell phone. Why not just pick her up on your way home from the hospital with your sister? It doesn't make sense. And this was his first version. He says that Nikki then stormed off into the night on the tribal reservation all alone. But his story evolved. Of course it does. And then it becomes, oh no, wait a minute. No, we drove back home and then we got into an argument. And then Nikki called an Uber and she left. And that's the last time Tyler saw her. Well, Uber has records, so that should be really easy to verify or even rule out. But this is all allegedly what Tyler said in the beginning. He's being pressed by different people, and he gives different versions. There's one where he flat out says, I don't know. I don't know where it was that we got into an argument, but she's gone on her own accord, her own free will. Why would this woman need to take an Uber? They have multiple vehicles. Answer me that. Because we're going to get into her Chevy Avalanche that was gifted to her by Tyler just a few weeks before this. Remember that? She had her very own truck. So why would she need to call an Uber? Again, not making any sense. And maybe that's why he keeps changing his story. A crime is only as good as the cover-up. If Tyler's involved, like many people believe he is. He must not have been that great at planning ahead, because his stories don't make sense, they don't add up, and there's a lot of holes in them. Well, Nikki's brothers then decide to put some pressure on Tyler because maybe he'll crack and tell them the truth if they confront him. His new version is back to the story of the lesbian love affair. This time, Nikki and Tyler get into an argument, and then her girlfriend comes and picks her up. So what's the girl's name? Shouldn't that be easy? She's one call away. We can just corroborate that story. Simple. But the story doesn't stop evolving. In other versions, Tyler says that Nikki has a secret boyfriend and that she's left to be with him in Vegas. Really? Wouldn't her sisters know that? I mean, some of y'all have sisters, right? You're going to tell them if you have a secret boyfriend. I mean, she told her sister she was getting a divorce. She told her sister she was getting an apartment and getting furniture, so why not talk about this guy you met? Wouldn't it be easy to just ask what happened to her if that was the case? Or wouldn't it be easy to just ask Jeanette? Because wouldn't she know? I mean, if Nikki was at her house, like Nikki told Chloe, and she was driving her back at 12:45, and she had driven her to the hospital and been with her for hours, and then she dropped her back off at home, wouldn't Jeanette just easily say, oh yeah, this is what happened, and be able to explain everything? Well, they asked Jeanette, and I guess memory loss must run in the family. I guess that's where Tyler gets it from, because when they asked Jeanette, she has a really bad memory, and she has no recollection of that night. Until she goes with the Uber story. But instead of it picking her up at Tyler's, the Uber picked Nikki up at Jeanette's. What? I mean, at this part, the sisters start calling around. Was Nikki at one safe place? Was she at their mother's house? Was she with a friend? I mean, she had really great friends. You would think of all the resources that Nikki had, she would have someone to turn to, someone to get a ride from if she needed it, sisters and brothers and family in the area. And if she was truly running away and needed help, I don't think she would be silent. Nobody else does either. And after no one could find her, her family finally reported Nikki missing on May 22nd of 2024, 4 days after her last text message. The Shasta County Sheriff's Office opened a missing persons investigation, and from the start, there were red flags. This was not the typical missing persons case. Nikki had left behind her children and cut off all contact with a family that she was very close to, which immediately suggested foul play or duress. That wasn't the Nikki that anyone knew. Not to mention the timing. Just a few weeks before Tyler was due in court on the DV and additional felony charges. Sheriff's detectives wasted no time in pursuing leads on Nikki's disappearance. They began retracing her last known steps and interviewing those closest to her, and that's when they hear from 𝐑𝐞𝐝. Remember? The guy who lived on the property? Well, he seems to corroborate one of Tyler's versions of his story. He said that Tyler asked him if he could do him a favor. Nikki was at the house with Jeanette's car. She needed to return Jeanette's car to Jeanette's house, and he wanted 𝐑𝐞𝐝 to follow Nikki in his car and then drive her back home. 𝐑𝐞𝐝 said sure, and that is what he said happened. He and Nikki drove over to Jeanette's with him following behind. They went inside, they hung out for a little while, and then he drove Nikki back to her house. He says when they got there, Tyler was at home hanging out in the garage, and Nikki was doing some laundry. Stop right there. Let's think about the timeline. 12:35 a.m. Nikki, or Nikki's phone, is texting Chloe saying she's driving to Jeanette's. If that's the case, Tyler says he didn't come home until after 2 a.m. He was at the hospital till 2 a.m. So that timeline doesn't add up. Unless 𝐑𝐞𝐝 and Nikki spent, I don't know, maybe a good hour and a half, 2 hours at Jeanette's, hanging out in the middle of the night after her son was in critical condition at the hospital. And then they went back home And then Tyler was back because his sister gave him a ride. But then why didn't he just swing by his mom's house? Because he's already on a ride. It's making my head spin. It doesn't make sense. Then 𝐑𝐞𝐝 says that sometime afterward, he saw Nikki get into an Uber and leave. When pressed about whether he was sure it was an Uber, he begins to question himself, now saying he can't really remember, that it could have been one of her friends. Well, I'm sure one of those friends or Uber records could rule all of this out or confirm it. It's interesting. And what's also interesting is that no one who supposedly saw Nikki that night, Jeanette, Tyler, or 𝐑𝐞𝐝, could give police a description of what Nikki was wearing. And this was just days after they last saw her. Now, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt time and time again. So I try to think, okay, what if I was in that situation? I was trying to think, I guess it depends on who it is if I would remember what they're wearing. If it was my husband, maybe. But all the days kind of fall into one another. I don't think I could remember that. But then I was thinking, could I remember, let's say, John's dad who came here last weekend? No, I can't. So I don't know if that's a red flag or not, but it's certainly not helpful, right? Because we know when someone goes missing, and I mentioned this earlier, we want to know specifics so that people could be on the lookout. What were they wearing? How tall are they? Do they have any distinguishing features? But what's really strange is that this whole time, not only is Nikki missing, but her vehicle is also gone. Remember what I told you that I was going to talk about her new to her 2002 Chevy Avalanche? Well, it wasn't at her house. That's strange. Here's what stood out. The car was never registered before it was given to Nikki, so Tyler never got it legally recorded. When interviewed, 𝐑𝐞𝐝 said the last person he saw driving the Avalanche was actually Tyler, so that's a red flag. And Tyler hadn't talked to the police yet. They tried going to his house on 2 occasions and he wasn't there. So around 6 p.m. on May 23rd, this was the day after Nikki was reported missing, Chloe took it upon herself to go over to Tyler and Nikki's house. She wanted answers. She actually hoped that her sister would be back home safe and sound. But instead, she ran into Tyler. And she began asking him questions. And he still insisted that he had no idea where Nikki was. But when pressed about her truck, Tyler gave a really weird response. He told Chloe, according to her, that it broke down near a bridge on Bowman Road. Now, I'm assuming he means while he was driving it. So Chloe asked, you know what, do you need a ride back out there? I can take you there. But he works on cars. He knows how to fix them. He's got a bunch of them on the property. So why did he just leave it there? You mean to tell me he had no way of going back and getting this car that broke down, or he didn't report it or tell anyone? And then he declined Chloe's offer and said, no, don't worry about it. My friend's going to take me over there. We're going to take care of it. I don't know where on Bowman Road he's talking about, but it was about a 24-minute drive to get to Bowman Road. And from what I saw on the maps, it was definitely out in the middle of nowhere, just surrounded by land. Now, Nikki's brother went to Bowman Road looking for bridges that very night because they were so focused on finding any clue as to where Nikki was. I'd be doing the same thing. And I actually kind of did. I used Google Maps and I tried to find a bridge on this road and I couldn't even find one. I didn't see any water in this area. I mean, it could have been like an overpass that could be considered a bridge, but I followed it until it turned into a different road. Well, that night, while Nikki's brother is out there trying to see what happened to Nikki, he sees a local guy walking around and he stops to ask him questions. This is a guy that lived in that area, and coincidentally, when this man is asked about seeing a gray Chevy Avalanche, the guy was like, wait a minute, there was someone out here and they were getting out of a car in this one area nearby, and he thought it looked odd, like they were kind of abandoning the vehicle. And that's why he took note of it, because he was local to the community and he did not recognize this person. So then the sisters and their husbands and fiancés get together, and that weekend they go to the same spot on Bowman and they see the very same guy again. He tells them the very same story, but they can't find the truck. And that has got to be so frustrating. But it wasn't long before there was a break in this case. On May 30th, the Shasta County Sheriff's Department announced that back on the 25th, the Chevy Avalanche had been located. Now, what's interesting is, remember I told you to remember a county name? Tehama County, remember that county? Well, that was the county that Brian McCain, Tyler's brother, had been arrested in the past. And it's out of the way. The truck wasn't located near Bowman Road. It was about 40 minutes away on the side of the road on Highway 36, which is literally in the middle of nowhere. I mean, on Google, it's like a desert. A perfect place to desert a car. Now, some reports say it was in a wooded area, and there aren't that many wooded areas until you get really up there. It's more canyon-y. I think the real foresty area is closer to the end of Tehama County. The reason I'm going so deep on this part is because allegedly there are reports that say it was found close to a property that was owned by Tyler's family. Could this be true? Sure. Especially since we know Tyler's brother, Brian, had an arrest record from the same county. Also, Bowman Road is on the way to Highway 36, so that's interesting. But finding Nikki's avalanche confirmed to many people that she hadn't simply run away to start a new life. It's not a place where you could just walk away from. The vehicle's location was miles away from anywhere Nikki normally went, and it raised immediate suspicions of foul play. Investigators combed the truck and the surrounding area for any evidence, but they did not find Nikki or any additional clues that were ever made public thus far. And I wanted to clarify that there was burn damage on this truck, but it was there prior to it going missing. Here's a picture, and you can clearly see it on the side. I mention this because some people think that it was burned while it was out there, and that is not what happened. But there are fires involved in this case that we will get to. But with the discovery of the abandoned truck, the sheriff's office intensified their investigation, and so did the public. They were scouring Highway 36, places near Nikki's home, anywhere they could think of, but nothing was found. Detectives obtained multiple search warrants early in this case, including a thorough search of Nikki and Tyler's home on Orlando Road, and forensic specialists scoured the house for any signs of a struggle or clues to Nikki's whereabouts. Investigators also quietly began looking into Nikki's inner circle, including Tyler, given his past and allegations of DV, but no arrests were made, and there were no persons of interest announced in the beginning. Nikki was just missing. And it's tough on families because missing persons cases are not like what we see or what we're used to seeing in homicide cases. It's much different. Law enforcement don't have as many resources at their disposal. That is why charities collect money for people who are missing so that you can pool resources together and people can help. The community can help. But just wait. Because the reason I'm even doing this case is because of an update. And I'm sure, I've already mentioned it, but I'm sure you've heard. Let's get there in time order so you can follow along. As the investigation quietly continued through late spring of 2024, troubling details about Nikki's marriage came to light publicly. The family that everyone thought was picture perfect from the outside wasn't. It emerged just 2 weeks after Nikki went missing. Tyler McCain had been scheduled to appear in court on the DV charges stemming from his brutal December 2023 attack on Nikki. Reddit was blowing up after this. The revelation of Nikki's domestic situation raised a lot of concern and media attention, and her family and even the public grew frustrated because of the lack of answers. Nikki's relatives took action to keep her story alive. They created a Bring Nikki Home social media campaign and even launched a GoFundMe fundraiser to aid in the search efforts. They even shared a timeline of her last known movements and emphasized her importance to her family. With Tyler's court date coming up, Nikki's supporters were ready to come out and rally outside the courthouse because Tyler wasn't talking, and everyone was pointing fingers at him. To the public, he was their prime suspect, public enemy number one. Who else would benefit from Nikki being gone? And guess what? He didn't seem like a grieving husband either. He didn't even come out to look for his wife, who just stays silent and stays home while everyone else looks. Well, I can tell you that Jen Soto and Madeline Soto's case is one of them. Chris Watts is another. And then there's Tyler McCain. Now, you may be wondering, with all the power and law enforcement the Redding Rancheria has at their disposal, and all the charity they do, and how giving they are to their own community members, you would think with a tribal member's wife going missing, a mother of 4 children who are part of this tribe through their father's family, there would be an extensive support system, and a lot of search support would be provided. But no. it was just crickets, especially because one of the last places that she was allegedly seen was on the reservation. But that's the thing. Tyler's family would have to call some of those shots, his aunt, others in power on the council, and wouldn't they if Tyler begged them to? If he was crying on his knees and saying, please look for my wife. I'm sure of it. Look at what they do to help their family members and members of their tribal community. That's what they do. They support each other. But their land is sacred. State police can't just go on it and conduct any search they want without Redding Rancheria's support and permission from the tribal court.
Today we are on another search for my sister. We're looking around the Clear Creek area.
We copy.
Okay, Station 7.
Family, friends, and civilians joined Sunday morning at 9 a.m., meeting at the Clear Creek Market outside of the Wind River Casino.
Why this area?
You know what, this area, just because it was searched already on Wednesday, but they didn't finish everything, and it's kind of close to where my sister was last known to be seen or heard from.
The Redding Rancheria Tribal Council granted the search group rights for a section of the otherwise private area for a few hours in the morning. The rest of the tribal grounds remain private, with tribal laws that prohibit non-tribal members from visiting.
Nikki's family asked the Wind River Casino to turn over CCTV footage, and they didn't. That's tribal land. So a state police warrant, I'm not even sure it has as much weight. I could be wrong. Casinos have some of the most cameras out of any other kind of businesses, so they're bound to have footage of the parking lot where the road leads to Jeanette's house. I was curious, so I just looked it up, and it says that state officers may serve state search warrants without obtaining a parallel tribal search warrant or a federal search warrant if the warrant is related to an off-reservation violation of a state law or to a crime committed within the reservation at a location where the state exercises criminal jurisdiction. But no crime has been committed, as far as they knew at the time. So I don't think they could get a warrant for the CCTV footage, but according to reports, the Rancheria stated it was cooperating with law enforcement and provided the requested information and video footage and has allowed local and warranted searches on their tribal land. But it doesn't mean all of it has been searched, and there's a lot of it. And then on June 26th, apparently police were searching Jeanette's house and the surrounding property. There were even reports of boxes of evidence being carried out of her home. But because no one actually knows where Nikki went missing from, the tribal laws still don't permit searches of private property. And there's a side note. Tyler's cousin Larry's property was also searched, which led to illegal weapons being found, and he was arrested on June 25th. This is only mentioned to show that there were firearms that anyone could have possibly possessed, even Tyler or someone else, and that his family was often tied to legal trouble. But there was also a billboard that was put up with funds from the Redding Rancheria along with a $10,000 reward, so they were doing something, and Nikki's family was grateful. But they do have a lot more power and could do much more. And I agree. A search of the property, at the very least, would be the right thing to do. The family has no information from the tribal law enforcement into Nikki's case, but that could change very soon, and I predict it will. But let's keep going so we can get there. Originally, Tyler's court date was July 2nd, but the preliminary hearing was June 3rd of 2024. And wow, was it quite an ordeal. Dozens of family members and friends and people from the community showed up holding signs, chanting, and demanding justice for Nikki. Tyler McCain, who attended his hearing with his attorney, had to be escorted in and out of the courthouse by marshals for his security.
Tyler had to go out back. He has to hide.
And this just showed the community's suspicion and anger towards him. There were all kinds of signs about justice for Nikki, and over 100 people were there. They were even chanting, "No justice, no peace," while Tyler's on the streets.
No justice, no peace, if Tyler's on the streets.
And let's just step back. Even if they were just there to make sure that he was convicted of the charges in the DV case, it still applies. He harmed her. He's violent and dangerous, allegedly, and shouldn't be out on the streets to hurt someone else. But the message was clearly that they thought that he hurt Nikki fatally, and they weren't going to be quiet until she was found. There were people who were running up to him, asking him questions like, where is she? And he would just kind of brush past them with no emotion.
Do you guys happen to know where Nikki might be?
He wasn't on his best behavior either. Not at all. He literally gave Nikki's family the middle finger. Well, that's not much of a distinguished gentleman, is it? No, it's not. It's rude. It's disgusting. Watch closely, or you will miss this subtle flip-off. Now I'm going to slow it down, and I will pause it for you. But he is 100% just flipping off Nikki's sisters. Now let's watch the rest of this interaction.
Tyler, where's Nikki? Where's Nikki, Tyler? Where's my sister? Where's my sister? Where's my sister? Where's my sister? If Tyler's on the streets, no justice, no peace. If Tyler's on the streets, no justice, no peace. If Tyler's on the streets, no justice, no peace. If Tyler's on the streets, where's my sister, Tyler?
Did you catch that person at the end? They were like, you're gonna burn, dude. And I know it's dramatic and I know it's a lot because, of course, he's not arrested, but this is what the community feels like. People even spoke out to Tyler's mom and grandmother as they walked into court.
Where's Nikki? Where's Nikki, Jeanette? Sandy, where's Nikki? Hey!
And we know that Nikki wasn't at the hearing. And you know what that means. When a key witness doesn't show up for a court date against the person the charges are against, it's dismissed. And that's what happened in this case. It was not a good day for Nikki's family, but I'm sure Tyler was sighing in relief. He wouldn't have to be sitting behind bars. Not yet anyway.
And the fact that they're talking about possibly dismissing those charges because she's not here is just a huge red flag.
Now, the district attorney can still refile these charges if Nikki becomes available or new evidence is discovered within 2 years. Well, unfortunately, and sadly, it doesn't seem like Nikki will return. But it does look like there could be new evidence coming out very soon.
The DA's office released a statement on Friday saying in part, quote, "The DA's office has exhausted all avenues to prove the case at this time without her. The DA's office reserves all rights to refile this case in the future."
Let's talk about something very concerning and suspicious. It could be a potential destroying of evidence, allegedly. Who knows, right? But I told you I was going to talk about some fires. Wildfires. And we know they can spread in the summer months, especially here in California. We just had a massive episode of wildfires not too long ago. But back on July 2nd, the day before the preliminary hearing was supposed to take place, well, there were some fires that broke out close to Tyler's cousin's property, and it burned 19 acres of land. That's weird, right? Well, it gets weirder. Because there was a public Facebook page that was dedicated to finding Nikki, and they were posting about wanting to search in that area. And now it's burned. So that makes it harder to search because evidence could be gone, but it also means that they're unable to even conduct a search. It had to be delayed. Could it have been on purpose or was it Mother Nature? Fires do spread. So was it odd that on the very next day, on July 3rd, another fire broke out? But not just in a random area, on Tyler's property. 98 acres burned. Even cars on Tyler's property. You know that little designated area where Tyler liked to tinker? Yeah. And Tyler was, of course, questioned by firefighters. There was even a picture of him speaking to one of them. And he admitted the fire was his fault, but not intentional. Oops, his car's catalytic converter combusted, and it was parked on tall grass, and then boom, it went up in flames, and it just spread. CAL FIRE did go out there and confirm that that's what happened. But I've heard this theory, and it makes perfect sense to me. Someone said he worked on cars. He knew how they operated. He fixed them. So could he have rigged one of them and set it up to where the converter would have malfunctioned? It's definitely interesting to think about, but there is no proof. This is just a theory.
We now know who caused the fire on Olinda Drive in Anderson that saw nearby homes evacuated and hundreds of acres burned. The North States News' Max Tedford is live out at the property where it started. Max, what did you learn today?
Well, Glenn, we now know that the fire was started here by a car left running at this property on Olinda Road. And we now have confirmed that both the car that caused the fire and this property are owned by Tyler McCain, husband of the missing Nikki McCain.
McCain approached me today while I was filming the damage left behind by the fire, sharing he was cited for it. He told me he just bought a car to fix up and had left it running for a few minutes while he went to get something inside. When he returned, he says the fire was ignited. He did allow me on the property to film the damage. I spoke with a neighbor of his named Charles, who asked us not to show his face, but shared while his home was safe, many of his neighbors were threatened by the fire.
Everybody's fired up. We know we want immediate justice. We know we want the other case to be solved. There's aggressions behind it, but there is due process. There is things that we have to wait on.
I asked CAL FIRE representatives why this fire resulted in a citation, whereas a fire like the Hidden Fire ended up with an arrest. They share they have to have enough evidence to prove a level of criminal negligence necessary for an arrest, something they say was not present in this case.
But there's more. Apparently, in the days before this fire, Nikki's sisters went to her and Tyler's home to go get some of her things, and while they were there, they were walking around and looking on the property, and they even took some video walking around in this exact area that burned down later. That area with all the cars is not the area where Tyler parks his regular vehicle. He parks it up by the house at the garage. So why would he drive his working vehicle over to the junk area? Was it because the family was snooping around where he didn't want them to be? It's just odd, that's all. I mean, he didn't know they were going to go out there that day. They came to get some of her things, and they just started to make their way out on the property. I mean, wouldn't you, if you had the chance to go see if maybe there was a clue to where your sister went? And that same day, Chloe's fiance talked to Tyler, and he said something really odd. He was like, I don't know why people think that I killed Nikki. I don't have a reason. I actually offered to pay her in return for her dropping the charges. What? A third fire began burning in yet another area of interest that was mentioned in the Facebook group. But to be fair, a lot of the areas that were mentioned weren't burned. So is it a coincidence that some of them were burned? It could be. Imagine celebrating your sister's 40th birthday, a huge milestone, without her. That's what Nikki's family just went through back in November. Her first birthday with her being gone.
If she was here, we'd probably be celebrating with lots of food and all her favorite things that she likes to eat. But, she's not here. We can't find her.
You might be thinking, what about the kids? What about Nikki's 4 children? Well, the sisters address this, saying they try to keep things as normal as possible, but the kids do know that their mom is missing. How sad is that?
It's a lot of emotions. We're just trying to hang in there. We want to stay strong for the kids and, of course, for the community, but it's tough. We've been trying to keep it as consistent as possible, and we've been trying to just kind of shield them from what's being said online, but also having them be aware that they do know that their mom is missing, but also just making sure that they're okay.
Tyler had another run-in with the law on July 31st of 2024 for a traffic violation. He was pulled over because his truck was missing a license plate, and he wasn't allowed to be in possession of firearms or ammunition, and they found ammo in his car. He was also driving on his suspended license. He was only in jail a few hours before he was bailed out, and a court date was set for October 7th. He made it to that appearance, and he was sentenced to 12 months of probation, as well as having to blow into one of those DUI devices attached to any car he operated in order to drive it. Now, he's still on probation until October 6th of this year, 2025. And the people came out to the courthouse for that hearing as well, holding up signs and putting pressure on him to say something. He had been very quiet this entire time. That is, until March 10th of this year, 2025. And that is where the updates start in this case. During the summer and fall of 2024, the sheriff's office remained very tight-lipped about the ongoing investigation, citing the fact that they needed to preserve the integrity of the case. But detectives continued to follow leads behind the scenes, and the FBI was quietly consulted early on, and FBI agents assisted local authorities with specialized resources, though this was not being widely publicized at the time. From the outside, it seemed like the case had stalled, but in reality, law enforcement was methodically building evidence. Friends and family continued to push for answers, and law enforcement had gradually shifted their approach from a search and rescue mindset to a criminal investigation. Apparently, Tyler also had a girlfriend living at the house back in December, or at the least, coming and going in Nikki's marital home. Wow. He really must think Nikki is never coming back. And it hasn't even been a year since she disappeared. But he has a new woman coming into their home on about the year anniversary of the attack on Nikki in December. What are your thoughts on that? Is this the everyone grieves differently type of thing or something else?
Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't it true a woman has moved in with Nikki's husband?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we have seen and heard that there is a woman living there, and it's likely his girlfriend.
And they held a press conference on March 10th, and guess who was there? Awkwardly standing with Nikki's family as her sisters held up a big picture of Nikki, none other than Tyler McCain. And before I play this for you, just watch him. Mopey, head down, not sure what to do with his hands, nervous body language. Let's slow it down. He glances at the picture of Nikki, then the audience, then her family, then the cops and the crowd, and fumbles with where to put his hands. Deciding to put his arms behind his back was his best choice, and this choice could mean a lot of things. It could actually mean confidence, but we don't see him being confident. He's more weak. His stance is nervous, and putting your hands behind your back like this can also signal frustration or stress. If the person is tense, and if they have a tight grip on their hands, this gesture could also be a sign of self-restraint. Because they're withholding information, they're putting their hands behind their back, it's a sign they're attempting to control their communication, what they say, or not fiddle, which can make them look even more nervous. And let's just say he has nothing to do with what happened to Nikki. He could still be nervous in a situation like this. Absolutely. Everyone acts differently when they're grieving, when they're sad, so maybe we shouldn't look into it. The audio, like always, is bad, but I'm going to try to make it better for you if I can. And I'm also going to use closed captions because I couldn't even understand what was happening without them. This officer was saying, and I'll put it up on the screen, he is Chris Edwards, the investigation captain, and they were there in regard to Nikki's case. They were asked by the family to address the media, but they're not going to be taking any questions, and the family member will not either. I was shocked, and I think a lot of other people were too, to see Tyler was going to speak. So let's play this.
Good morning. My name is Chris Edwards, the investigations captain of the Sheriff's Office. And we're here this morning regarding the Is Nikki McCain case. At this point, we were asked by the media, by the family, who wanted to address the media regarding her investigation. And at this point, let's let the media know that we're not planning on taking any questions after regarding this case, and the families relate the same, so please respect that. So at this point, the Benton Sheriff's Office is continuing to investigate this. We have since last May, or nearing a year. At this point, for about 10 months, and still actively working the case. So at this point of the conference, we'll let the family address the media as requested.
You can talk with your so we just have we'll have each family member.
Well, I'm Tyler McCain. I'm the husband of Nikki McCain. First of all, I would like to thank the Sheriff's Office, FBI, for getting involved. Any efforts that that might help bring my wife home, safely. We miss you. I don't really know what to say. I haven't been in the public eyes, and I haven't done very well with it. I apologize to everyone, especially my children, my wife's family, mine as well. I'm just here in support, so anything that I can do, I want to do that. Okay, I'll take over.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you.
So he thanks the cops and the FBI, and he says any effort to bring his wife home safe would be appreciated, and then goes into speaking directly to Nikki and saying, "We miss you." But he stumbles over his words, saying he doesn't know what to say, but then he makes excuses, saying he hasn't been in the public eye and he wants to apologize to the children and to Nikki's family, and his as well. An apology. That's interesting. I know he means he's apologizing for being quiet, but it's still interesting to me because he's apologizing. He's guilty about something. I mean, why wouldn't you help? And why wouldn't you speak on your wife's behalf and for her search? But he said if there's anything he can do, he just wants to do that. He walks away, and I'm guessing he takes a seat in the crowd, and her sisters have a totally different demeanor. They came prepared, and they thanked and talked confidently to the audience and directly to the media and the crowd, beginning by, of course, telling them about who their sister is. Her own husband is fumbling over his words and has nothing to say, but her sisters say this bravely to advocate to her. Let's play it.
Hello, my name is Kay Ford.
And I'm 𝐂𝐲𝐳. We just want to start off by saying thank you for being here today to hear about our missing sister, 𝐑𝐞𝐝𝐲 McCain, who has been missing for 296 days.
We have spent each of those days in agony, longing for her safe return to her family and her children. She vanished on May 18th, 2024, and we urgently need your help to find her. We are pleading with anyone with information to come forward. This is a call to action to bring our sister home.
Nikki is approximately 5 feet tall and she weighs about 90 to 95 pounds. She has dark brown reddish colored hair, and at the time of her disappearance she was 39 years old. She was allegedly last seen May 18th, 2024.
She was reportedly picked up at her mother-in-law Jeanette Hayward McCain's house at the Redding Rancheria in Redding, California. She may have been dropped off at her home on Olinda Road in Happy Valley. Her truck that Tyler recently purchased for her was found abandoned on Highway 36 near Bigham Road. She hasn't been seen or heard from since.
We want to express our deepest gratitude to everyone who has helped in the search for my sister. To the volunteers, law enforcement, the media, private investigators, and the individuals who have dedicated their time and resources to searching for her, and to every single person who has shared her story, kept an eye out, and offered support, thank you. Your kindness and determination mean the world to our family during this incredibly difficult time.
We also want to sincerely thank the Shasta County Sheriff's Office Major Crimes Unit for their continued efforts and for giving us this platform to keep our sister's story alive. Their support in this search has been invaluable, and we are grateful for their dedication to helping us find her.
Nikki, you are missed every single day. We wonder if you're at peace. Your absence leaves a void that can't be filled, and we want to bring you home. You are loved beyond measure, and we will keep searching for you until you're back in our arms. No matter how tired we are, we will keep fighting. Your kids need you, and we need you. And we just want you to know this is not your fault. For almost a year, we've been searching for our sister and for a major break in the case that will help us find her. We miss her desperately, and we will never give up. But we need your help. If you have seen anything, heard anything, or know anything, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, please come forward. Any piece of information could be the key to bringing our sister home.
Our mission is clear. We must bring Nikki home. Your help is critical, and we welcome any support from those who know and love her. We have connected with the missing persons community, including Gabby Petito's mother. Gabby Petito was found after a tip from social media, and we haven't lost hope.
We just ask that you continue to please keep Nikki in your thoughts, but more importantly, don't forget about her. Get the word out on social media. We're using hashtag Where's Nikki. Please keep her name out there, and again, please do not forget, and we can't state this enough, please, someone has to know something, and we need that person or those people to speak up. We will not rest until she is found.
If you have any information, please contact the Shasta County Major Crimes. And to find out more about her case, we did create a website. It's www.where-is-nikki.com. Our family is holding on to hope, and we won't stop until we find her. Thank you.
Wow. 296 days. That's insane. And this was a call to action for the community to come forward. These resources will be linked below in the description box in case you need any of this information regarding this case. One link I will let you know right away was one on the sign where-is-nikki.com. And there are Instagram and Facebook accounts dedicated to this case as well. They're hoping that social media can help find Nikki. I was curious why Tyler wasn't standing with her family while they were speaking. He just goes and sits down to listen. I was so confused. Now, the rest of this video is everything being translated into Mian, and I've been showing you a picture of Nikki this whole time. She is around 5 feet tall with brown hair and brown eyes, and about 100 to 110 pounds with a tattoo on her left forearm of black roses. There's also a $30,000 reward for any information about what happened to Nikki. Nikki's sisters spoke out about Tyler being at that press conference, and here's what they said.
I was really excited to have him there, potentially working with us. I know he hasn't been very present in the searches or asking for the public's help. So I was hoping that that would be the start of some collaboration in this effort.
However, this wasn't the big update. Only days after that press conference, a major announcement came in. On March 14th of 2025, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office officially reclassified Nikki's disappearance as a homicide investigation. Now, this changes everything. I'm going to read you this press release. It's titled, Missing Person Investigation Turns to Homicide, and reads, on Friday, March 14th of 2025, detectives with the Shasta County Sheriff's Office Major Crimes Unit, along with agents of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, served a search warrant at 17277 Olinda Road, Anderson, California. This address is where Nikki 𝐞𝐝 McCain resided when she was initially reported missing by family members on May 22nd, 2024. That's her and Tyler's home, just so you know. Since the initial investigation, detectives have worked tirelessly to locate Nikki and to determine the events leading to her disappearance. Detectives have served numerous search warrants, including a prior search warrant at Nikki's residence. Furthermore, detectives have interviewed family members, friends, and acquaintances of Nikki, including citizens who have reported information about her disappearance. Based on evidence gathered, information learned from interviews, and the fact that none of Nikki's family members have heard from Nikki since May 18th, 2024, detectives have determined Nikki is a victim of homicide. Detectives have identified persons of interest in her homicide. However, their identities are being withheld due to the ongoing nature of this investigation. Now, there was one important part. They said their identities, plural. That's one. And here's probably the most important part of this press release. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has been assisting with this investigation along with other local allied agencies. Detectives are asking for the public's help with identifying a driver of a red in color truck who may have picked up a male adult in the area of Highway 36 in the western portion of Tehama County near the R. Wild Horse Ranch or the Begum George Bridge between May 18th and May 25th, 2024. We're going to get to that. It goes on to say a combined reward of up to $30,000 still stands for anyone who provides information that leads to Nikki's location. Anyone with information about this investigation is asked to contact the Major Crimes Unit by email at mcu@shastacounty.gov or at 530-245-6135.
When it was changed from a missing persons case to a homicide, I think that me and along with a lot of people in my family felt a sense of relief, but also we are super sad, but it just feels good to have that confirmation.
All right. I want to go back to the red truck. I said that was possibly one of the most important things in this press release, along with the fact that it is plural, persons of interest. Here is where the Wild Horse Ranch is located. It is on Highway 36, where Nikki's truck was ultimately found. And it's interesting that the other location is a bridge, Begum George Bridge, because remember that Tyler initially said, oh, the truck broke down near a bridge. It's like, you know, when you mix the truth with a lie? I couldn't find a bridge by that exact name, but I figured it was in this vicinity, and I looked around on Google Maps and I found one. It's over the South Fork Creek area, diagonal to the Wild Horse Ranch on Highway 36, 7 minutes from the ranch. And it goes right over this creek. Wow. So what does this tell us? Well, if we put our detective caps on, someone dropped off Nikki's vehicle over in this area. And then they got a ride from someone in a red truck. Was it that this person was hitchhiking and a random person picked them up? Was it a friend that followed the person that was driving Nikki's truck? We don't know. But the fact that Tyler mentioned a bridge seems significant to me. I couldn't help but wonder if Nikki was out there somewhere close to this location, out in the middle of nowhere. 5 days ago, I saw an episode of Nancy Grace, and her video caught my eye because the title was about Nikki's body being moved. And I was like, wait, body? What is she talking about? So of course I had to listen. Apparently, Tyler spoke to Nikki's sisters, and he stuck to his story. They thought that he was going to break and reveal something because he did get emotional. And her sister Kay got confrontational with Tyler, but then he actually smirked at her. I'm going to play that portion for you.
The night before the raid happened, he actually reached out to my brother and wanted to talk to my brother. And after him and Tyler talked, me and my sister realized, wait a second, we need to go talk to Tyler ourselves. And so me and my sister Kay did go into his home and talk to him. He was sticking to his story. For a little bit, I thought that he was going to break. He did seem emotional, but then there was a time where Kay did get a little bit confrontational. I understand she just wanted some answers, and he did kind of smirk at her as well too. So he still kind of kept that I'm innocent and I didn't do anything.
And I can't believe he still has not helped search. Now, they talked about a raid being done at Tyler's residence, and this was before the media release. There were videos of law enforcement outside of Tyler and Nikki's house. After this, that's when they announced it was a homicide investigation. So it tends to lean to them finding evidence to suggest something happened. And apparently, they did this while he was at the press conference. So that's interesting. Could it have been that they wanted him to be away from the house so they could serve their warrant and get in there and search around without him there? An eyewitness reported that they spent the majority of their time in the garage. Now, we know for sure that the garage was a place where illicit substances had been at one point and been taken by Tyler. It's also where a lot of his tools were located and ones that he would work on vehicles with. There were also people who thought they saw infrared kits being brought into the house. And the search went on for several hours. It was very extensive. It was also said that crime scene technicians were on scene. And none of this, by the way, has been confirmed by law enforcement. This is just what people who were driving by, taking videos, kind of snooping around. They were driving back and forth and observing. This is what they reported. When they say infrared kits, it could have been an alternative light source. And this would be used to illuminate different areas. It's kind of like luminol when you use a light to have a different perspective of areas that could have been cleaned, for example. There were also a lot of evidence bags that were being removed. So they were definitely taking items from the premises, which I think is significant. Maybe they were going to test some of those items for DNA. And I don't just mean skin cells or transfer DNA from her living there. I mean blood. Now, I feel like Nancy Grace's thumbnail could have been a little bit clickbait because no body has been found. But while I was watching and listening to this podcast video, they did suggest that this was a theory, that her body had been moved. And I'm going to be talking about several theories in just a moment, so if you want to stay for that, it is coming. If not, there are chapters for a reason. But let's listen to what Nikki's sisters told Nancy Grace.
The theory, one of the working theories, is that Nikki's body may have been moved from one location law enforcement is looking at to another. 𝐶𝐞𝐝𝐲, have you heard that theory?
Yes, I've heard that theory, and I've also heard other theories as well, that she was moved from one car to another car and moved from where she was last killed into another location. Yes, we've heard that.
Kay Ford, have you heard similar theories?
I have, to echo what Chloe said. We have heard where the attack took place and potentially where she was actually killed are two different locations.
They are suggesting something happened at one location, like the house. She was killed and then moved to where the car was found, or possibly transported in her truck. Depending on how she was killed, maybe there would be nothing in the vehicle. If someone was strangled, for example, there wouldn't necessarily be blood left behind. And since it was her truck that she drove, her DNA would be expected to be present. And a lot of times when you are dealing with a homicide, a person is killed in one location and then brought to at least one secondary location where the body is hidden and concealed. There were suggestions that her body may have been put in the car and moved from one car to another car, or moved from one place to another place while in the car. Maybe it had been on Bowman Road at one point and then moved elsewhere. Anything is possible. Now, if you don't want to hear theories about this case, then you can skip this part. Several theories have emerged about what could have happened to Nikki. From the very beginning, the circumstances have been strongly pointing to an inside job. In other words, foul play by someone close to Nikki rather than some random crime. The most widely discussed theory, this is on Reddit and other places, is that Nikki's husband, Tyler McCain, was involved in her disappearance and her presumed murder. The potential motive would fit a sadly familiar pattern in DV cases. Nikki was on the verge of leaving a spouse who had mistreated her physically and that she had charges against. And the period when this victim is trying to leave can be the most dangerous, is the most dangerous. In fact, a source told reporters that shortly before Nikki went missing, a loud argument was overheard at the McCain residence. And this is when, I told you, someone heard him literally say he was going to kill her. Nikki herself had expressed fear for her life after surviving the December attack. While hospitalized, she confided in that sheriff that she thought her husband was going to kill her. Given this history, it is a tragically reasonable theory that Tyler might have made good on his threats when he realized that Nikki was truly going to leave him, testify against him in court, and that he was going to have to pay child support and maybe not even see his kids. It would explain why Nikki vanished so suddenly in the middle of the night and why her belongings, like her truck, turned up in a bizarre location. It would also explain Tyler's strange behavior, for example, not reporting his own wife missing for days, staying out of the public for 9 months, and needing to be pressed to make a statement. Important caveat. As of now, Tyler McCain has not been officially named a suspect or charged in the connection with Nikki's death and disappearance. A second theory is that one or more accomplices may have been involved in whatever happened to Nikki. If Tyler was involved, it's possible that he didn't act entirely alone. The fact that authorities refer to persons of interest, plural, hints that more than one individual is being scrutinized. And this raises questions. Could a friend or a family member have helped plan or cover up a crime? For instance, someone may have helped dispose of Nikki's body or drove her truck out to that remote area. We don't know. The detail that Nikki's avalanche was left not far from property owned by Tyler's relatives, his cousin's land, is in between the spot where the truck was found and where those fires occurred. That has fueled a lot of speculation along these lines. Perhaps evidence was destroyed or a diversion was created. Now, it is conceivable that if Nikki was killed at or near her home, the perpetrator transported her body using one of their vehicles and then tried to eliminate that evidence, for example, by burning that evidence. However, there is no concrete evidence of accomplices that have been made public. And investigators have not accused Tyler's family of any wrongdoing, but they're certainly mapping out everyone's whereabouts and actions around the time that Nikki disappeared. Now, there are other viable theories beyond those that are centered around DV. It could have been a stranger or a random crime, but that's considered unlikely based on what is known. Nikki was last heard from driving to a familiar family location after midnight. It would be an extreme coincidence for a random perpetrator to have intercepted her at that exact moment. Additionally, Nikki left behind everything that mattered, her kids, her close-knit family, her personal belongings, which goes against any notion that she deliberately walked away or staged her own disappearance, which was another theory. And to be fair, people are just voicing their opinions, that's all it is. But according to her sisters, Nikki was excited and hopeful about starting a new chapter in her life. She wasn't looking to run away at all. And all signs indicate that Nikki intended to return home that night in May of 2024. but something or someone prevented her from doing so. This is a sad, sad situation, and I wanted to bring more awareness to it because someone does know something, especially because a red truck has been mentioned. Someone had to have seen something, and if they did, they need to say something. Of course, officers know a lot more than we do right now, and they definitely are onto something. And I think an arrest will be made. I know it hasn't, but I predict one will be coming very soon. A lot of times, when police put out a release like that, of course they're telling the public, but they're actually hoping that the perpetrator will come forward, thinking that there is a mountain of evidence against them. And saying that they do have persons of interest, they're zeroing in. The walls are closing in. And that's one way to put pressure on someone so they can come forward. It's only been a few days, so we're just gonna have to wait to see what happens. But I hope that I was able to give you an in-depth overview of everything we know so far. And I will put any updates in my community posts. If you don't know where that is on my YouTube channel right here. You can also look there for any updates that are going on with my channel. And I also have an Instagram group that you can join. There's 3,000 of you already in there. It's free. You don't have to pay anything, but we gather there so we can talk about behind the scenes, and I can give you information on cases like this one and many other things. So thank you so very much for being here today for Nikki's case. I will see you in my next one. Bye.